So Alexa Philippou revealed something today about the WNBA, what the WNBA have offered for players. It says here, the WNBA's latest proposal includes an uncapped revenue sharing model that would include raise max salaries above 1.3 million, growing to over 2 million, nearly 2 million over the life of the deal. I don't know how long it's going to be. And raise the average salaries to 530k. And then 770k over the lifetime of the deal. If I'm not mistaken, the average WNBA salary is about 120k.
We are looking at an absolutely staggering 600% salary increase across the board. I want you to really process that number for a second, because it is virtually unheard of in any industry. We are talking about maximum salaries jumping from a base of $200,000 to over $2 million. Meanwhile, the average player compensation is slated to skyrocket from $120,000 all the way up to $770,000. These aren't just incremental bumps. These are massive, life-altering financial shifts that would completely redefine what it means to be a professional athlete in this league.
Players, go fight for what you want. There is no way this can be that far. The way the WNBA are characterizing the money. By the sounds of things, the WNBA are not budging on the revenue split at all, and that is the one thing they will never get. Like everything else the WNBA can get. The reason why WNBA won't get the revenue split is, as we know, the league doesn't have 100% ownership. Is the reason why they're not going to get it. And if that is a non-negotiable, the WNBA is just not going to exist. And we can be honest. But we're now at the stage where I think we can say this.
And yet, despite these numbers, the Players' Union is officially calling this offer a slap in the face. Think about that for a moment. This has moved beyond a standard labor negotiation. We are now witnessing a high-stakes game of chicken where it looks like both drivers have actually taken their hands off the wheel. Neither side seems willing to blink, and the tension is reaching a breaking point that could have devastating consequences for everyone involved.
MVP players, with this being the salary, and by the way, again, I'm not just saying the players snap your hand off and accept this salary or anything. Like, the reason why, again, the players can't get 30% of the revenue because the operating costs are so high right now. And the amount of revenue that's brought in versus the operating cost is not big enough to give the players the percentage they want right now. It's just not, because this is an ownership group that has been eating losses for 30 years. And even though, yes, maybe in 15 years in the future, if the league continues on its growth, these teams can be profitable. The problem is,
it feels like we are standing on the edge of a cliff, about to watch 28 years of hard-earned progress turn into a literal fireball on the highway. All the growth, all the history, and all the momentum the league has built up since 1997 is being put on the line right now. If this ends in a total shutdown, we aren't just looking at a missed season, we're looking at the potential destruction of the entire infrastructure of women's professional basketball in America. Let's break down exactly what is on the table right now, because the numbers are actually quite incredible. The WNBA's latest proposal includes a system of uncapped revenue sharing that would see max salaries rise above $1.3 million in the very first year. By the time this deal reaches its final year, those top-tier salaries would be approaching nearly $2 million annually. It's a ladder system where average salaries would start at $530,000 initially and climb steadily to that $770,000 mark by the end of the agreement.
big problem is that while yes, franchise values are going up, this, like, giving the players the revenue split they're asking for will guarantee them operating at a loss for the foreseeable future. And by the foreseeable future, I mean guarantees it at an operating loss for probably a decade. During this TV deal anyway, which is 11 years. It's pretty much guaranteeing that they're losing money over these 11 years. And I don't know. I think it's one of those things where...
To give you some much-needed context on why this is so significant, the current average WNBA salary is sitting at roughly $120,000. When you compare that to the new proposal, you realize this isn't just a simple cost of living adjustment or a move to keep pace with inflation. This is something much bigger. We are looking at a total, fundamental restructuring of how players are compensated in this league, moving them from solid middle-class earnings into the realm of true professional sports wealth. But here is the kicker. According to the Players Association, this offer is so far off the mark that it doesn't even deserve a formal response. They aren't even coming back to the table to counter-offer. And that massive disconnect right there, that total breakdown in communication between what the league thinks is a historic offer and what the players think is an insult, is exactly what should be terrifying every single person who cares about the future of this league. If they can't even agree on the starting point, how do they ever reach a finish line?
It's hard to, if you argue for the players. By the way, the players are bringing in so much there are players that are bringing so much fucking money, but there are players that aren't. And there are teams that even with the new TV deal, like people don't realize in terms of the revenue, the TV deal money basically pays for charter flights. It's as good, like the league gets whatever it is, 200 million a year. 80 million of that goes to the league, and charter flights are probably going to cost about 60 million. So all that new TV deal money that people are talking about, that's just pays for the charter flights. It is a problem that running this league in terms of getting players from A to B costs no less in the WNBA as it does the NBA. But the NBA draws in 40 times the revenue.
The problem isn't hidden in some fine print. The actual sticking point here isn't complicated at all. It all comes down to one phrase: revenue sharing. The players are looking for a guaranteed percentage of the league's total revenue, which is a model very similar to what the NBA players currently have. The number being thrown around behind the scenes is 30%. On the other side, the league is offering these massive fixed increases instead, with some uncapped potential tied to specific performance metrics, but they are drawing a hard line against a pure revenue split, and this is where the situation gets incredibly messy and complicated. You see, the WNBA doesn't actually operate like the NBA, even though everyone wants to compare the two. For nearly 3 decades, this league has been heavily subsidized by NBA ownership, essentially operating at a loss year after year while the theoretical value of the franchises increases on paper. It's a unique, somewhat fragile financial ecosystem that relies on the Big Brother League to keep the lights on while waiting for the business to finally become self-sustaining.
Operating costs are similar. To run a practice facility, men's and women's, is very similar. To build a practice facility costs the same, whether it's men's or women's. And apparently there are some standards that they want to set. They want to set these standards, and it's at the stage now where I'm like, the league's responses are literally just seem to be the case of like every time the players come out and are basically like, oh, this is a slap in the face. The league aren't taking us seriously. And then suddenly you're like 600% increase in pay. And I'm like, there is no way you can argue that this is a slap in the face. But the players are. And that's one of the things where it's like, I understand nobody's dumb enough to not play this league. But it's getting to the stage where you're like, shit, this is like, it's now getting to the stage where this is a game of chicken that if you...
But here's the reality: those rising franchise values only actually matter if you can sell a team and realize that profit, and right now, the league is taking a very aggressive stance by preventing owners from selling to the highest bidder if it doesn't fit their geographic strategy. Just look at the mess happening with the Connecticut Sun right now to see how this plays out in the real world. You have an ownership group that is ready to move on, but the league is pulling the strings in a way that limits their options. The ownership group in Connecticut wants to sell, and there are actually interested buyers right there in the state who are willing to pay the full market value to keep the team where it is. But the league has stepped in and essentially mandated that the team must relocate to Houston. To make matters worse, the Houston ownership group isn't willing to pay anywhere close to what the Connecticut buyers are offering. We're talking about a massive gap in valuation that is essentially being forced upon the current owners by league headquarters. We are talking about a $100 million gap between what the team is worth on the open market and what the league's preferred buyer in Houston is willing to pay. Think about that from an owner's perspective. You are being told you have to take a $100 million hit because the league wants a team in a specific city. This owner is essentially stuck holding an asset that they are not allowed to liquidate at fair market value because the league is prioritizing its expansion map over the basic rights of existing owners.
Not only are you fucked, and that's the majority of players, because let's be real, a $770,000 average salary. If you end up being if you were, let's just say, I'm just going to think who's drafted around 2015, and was decent. Maybe like an Izzy Harrison. I know she had some good years, but Izzy Harrison, in her WNBA career over 10 years, probably made like 1 million maybe. Due to overseas and everything else she played in, she probably made another little bit more than that. Let's just say 1.5 million. So maybe she made 2.5 million over her career. A player like that. And look, if you're making 2.5 million over 10 years in a normal job, that's good money, but like you're not going to have, again, any sort of generational wealth out of that. Like you're not going to be able to retire afterwards. If you are an average WNBA player, then let's be real, like, if you are bang average, you're probably making thereabouts league average. And if you are a player that's a freshman or a freshman high school right now, and you become an average, and you end up growing up to be an average WNBA player, and you spend 10 years in the league, you're probably making 8 million from just...
It's one of those situations that perfectly exposes the fundamental flaw in the players' demands for revenue sharing. If the values of these franchises don't translate into actual cash or liquidity, if owners are literally being blocked from exiting their investments without taking massive forced losses, then the entire financial model the players are demanding becomes fundamentally unsustainable. You can't share revenue that is tied up in theoretical valuations that the league won't let you actually realize. And then there's the television money that everyone keeps talking about. People point to the New Deal and say it brings in roughly $200 million every year, which sounds like an enormous mountain of cash. But when you start peeling back the layers, you see where that money actually goes. Right off the top, $80 million is sucked up by league operations. Then you have the charter flights, which the players rightfully demanded for safety and comfort, but those cost approximately $60 million per year. That leaves you with $140 million already spoken for and spent before a single dollar ever reaches a player's salary. You have to remember that the operating costs for a WNBA team mirror NBA expenses in almost every category. A state-of-the-art practice facility costs the exact same amount to build and maintain, whether it's for a men's team or a women's team. The electricity, the equipment, and the staff don't get a discount just because the league's revenue is lower.
With endorsements, with everything else, over your 10-year career, instead of making 2.5 million with playing overseas, you're probably making 10 million without playing overseas. So it's at the stage now where if you make 10 million over 10 years, by the way, without playing overseas, and you're smart with your money, it doesn't matter what your taxes are. If you are smart with your money, $10 million, you are set for life. Like, we can be honest here. $10 million if you're smart with your money. If you start blowing it on bullshit, no, you're not going to be. You can very easily lose $10 million. But at the same time, if you're smart with that money, you can be set for life. And you won't have to work another day for the rest of your life. And a CBA not happening, or the players going on strike and there not being a 2026 season, means every one of these offers is never happening again. They're not going to come back and say, okay, yeah, we're going to give you the revenue split that you want. The fact is that it becomes it's really difficult to give the revenue split. The teams could literally offer an amount of money that is an equivalent to the revenue split they want. But the reason why teams won't do that is that for teams to not work at an operating loss guaranteed, there needs to be some sort of structure. As well as that, if there's a constantly fluctuating salary cap, it's at the stage where
the logistics of travel are identical. The medical staffs require the same elite qualifications, and the coaching salaries are rising across the board. Then you have arena rentals during the season, which are fixed costs that don't care about your league's total income. These expenses simply do not scale down proportionally. The NBA generates roughly 40 times the revenue of the WNBA, but they are operating with very similar baseline costs for facilities and travel. That is the massive math problem that nobody seems to want to acknowledge in public. When one league has 40 times the revenue, but shares many of the same high-level costs, the math for a revenue split becomes a nightmare. Let's put a human face on this and talk about what it means for an individual player's life. Take someone like Izzy Harrison, for example. She was drafted around 2015 and has had a very solid 10-year career as a reliable rotation player. Over that entire decade in the WNBA, she has probably earned around $1 million total in league salary. Even if she played overseas during every single offseason, she might have pulled in another $1.5 million. So, after 10 years of grinding at the highest level, we are looking at $2.5 million in total career earnings. Now, that is definitely good money by normal standards, but let's be real, after you pay the taxes, the agent fees, and the high expenses of maintaining a pro-athlete lifestyle during the season, you aren't exactly retiring for life, you aren't setting up generational wealth for your kids. You're likely transitioning into a completely different second career in your early 30s and just hoping you were smart enough with your investments to have a head start. Now, I want you to imagine that exact same career arc, but starting in 2026, under this new proposed deal the league has put forward with an average salary of $770,000. A solid rotation player is going to be making close to that number every single year. Over a 10-year career, that is $7 to $8 million just from their WNBA salary alone. When you add in the endorsement opportunities that come with the league's massive new visibility, you are looking at $10 million in total earnings. That is life-changing, never work again if you don't want to, money. That is retiring at 35 with your house paid off and your kids' college fully funded. But despite that massive leap in quality of life, the Players Association is saying this still isn't enough. Now, look, from a pure labor negotiation standpoint, I totally get where they're coming from. You always fight for every single dollar you can get, and you use whatever leverage you have to push the envelope. That is how collective bargaining has worked for 100 years. The terrifying part here is that the leverage calculation might be catastrophically wrong. We have to be honest about the stakes here. A strike in this situation doesn't just pause the league for a few months while everyone cools off. This isn't like the NBA or MLB, where a strike is a temporary hurdle. A strike in 2026 means there is no 2026 season, period. And if that happens, there is a very real chance there is no 2027 season either. This isn't just a pause button, it's a potential delete button for the entire league's progress. Think about what happens during that year off from the owner's perspective. These are people who have been eating financial losses for decades, essentially keeping the league afloat as a long-term investment. They were promised that eventually, the values would justify the losses. If they are suddenly looking at a year with zero revenue but they still have to pay for facilities, legal fees, and contractual obligations, they are going to start asking themselves if this investment is still worth the headache. This is exactly where the social media discourse completely disconnects from the cold, hard reality of business. Yes, viewership is way up, and yes, Caitlin Clark has brought an unprecedented level of attention and energy to the league. We've seen attendance records shattered and media coverage explode. All of that is 100% true, and it's amazing to see, but the part people don't want to hear is that none of that has actually translated into profitability yet. The league is still bleeding money in the red. Even with the new TV deal, the numbers just don't add up to immediate profit because the operating costs of a professional league are just that massive. The WNBA is trying to maintain NBA-level standards while having only a tiny fraction of the revenue. Revenue sharing sounds like a fair theory, and it works in the NBA because the pool of money is so big that giving players half still leaves the owners with hundreds of millions in profit. In the WNBA, giving a 30% split when the league isn't profitable yet just guarantees that the owners will lose money for another decade. You can certainly make the argument that owners should just accept those losses as part of the investment, and some of them might, but the WNBA is made up of 12 different ownership groups with 12 different financial situations and 12 different levels of patience. You only need a few of those owners to decide they've had enough before the whole thing starts to contract. If teams start folding, the league will be scrambling to find new buyers in an environment where labor relations have completely turned toxic. Furthermore, the specific revenue-sharing structure the players are asking for creates a massive management problem. If the salary cap is tied directly to annual revenue on a percentage basis, it's going to swing wildly from year to year. That sounds fair on paper, but it makes planning impossible. In a growth year, every single player would sign one-year deals to chase the rising cap, meaning nobody has long-term security. The whole system becomes a game where everyone is trying to time the market instead of building a team. And we have to consider the what-if scenarios that nobody likes to talk about. What happens if the cap actually goes down? What if the next TV deal isn't as big? Or what if the massive Caitlin Clark effect eventually starts to level off or fade? If you have players on guaranteed contracts that suddenly exceed a falling salary cap, the teams become financially paralyzed. They wouldn't be able to field competitive rosters because all their money is locked into deals signed when revenue was at its peak. The NBA can handle these dips because they have a massive financial cushion. The WNBA has zero cushion. This is exactly why the league is trying to steer the conversation toward fixed increases with uncapped upside instead of a pure percentage split. It provides a safety net. It protects the players from downside scenarios where the league has a bad year, while still giving them massive raises. It offers a level of financial predictability that allows ownership to keep investing. But since it's not the specific revenue-sharing label the players want, we are stuck in this stalemate. So let's be extremely clear about the worst-case scenario here. If these negotiations fail and the players actually go through with a strike, the league won't just be on hold, it will likely collapse. Every single ounce of momentum generated by the 2025 season will evaporate into thin air. Caitlin Clark's historic rookie year will become a distant memory rather than a foundation for the future. The casual fans who just started watching will simply move on to something else. Once those fans leave, the broadcast partners who just paid record prices for the rights are going to start asking for their money back. The sponsors who were excited about the growth projections will pull their funding and look for safer places to put their marketing dollars. If that happens, the players don't just lose a year of pay, they lose their entire careers. If the league folds, there is no $770,000 salary waiting for them. There is no $2 million max contract. There is simply no place left to play at this level. You can definitely argue that this isn't fair in a moral sense. You can argue that these owners are billionaires and should just keep paying whatever it takes to ensure equity with the men's game. You can make all sorts of valid points about social justice and sports history. But at the end of the day, this isn't a university seminar. It's a high-stakes business negotiation where both sides have to live with the actual economic consequences of their choices. Right now, it looks like one side is betting everything on Twitter engagement, while the other side is looking at a balance sheet full of red ink. The most frustrating part of this entire situation is that the offer currently on the table is genuinely, objectively transformative. We aren't talking about a small 5% raise or some minor improvements to travel. We are talking about life-changing wealth for the vast majority of players in this league. A 600% increase in average pay is the kind of leap that usually takes 50 years to achieve, and it's being offered all at once. It would allow players to finally stop playing overseas year-round just to survive. Is the offer everything the players ever dreamed of? No, probably not. Is it perfectly fair when you look at the percentages the NBA players get? Maybe not. But the real question the Players Association has to answer is whether it's enough. Is it enough to build a stable, wealthy career? Is it enough to secure their financial futures? And most importantly, is it enough to avoid blowing up the entire league over a disagreement about revenue percentages? They have to make that call knowing there is no safety net if they're wrong. Because here is the cold truth about this game of chicken in the end. Someone always loses, and in this specific scenario, if the players lose the negotiation, they lose everything. They lose their platform, their league, and their livelihood. If the owners lose, They basically just lose a relatively small fraction of their overall wealth and a tax write-off. They can walk away and invest in something else tomorrow. The players don't have that luxury. For them, this league is the only game in town. So when the union leaders stand up and call a 600% raise a slap in the face, they are taking an enormous gamble with the lives of every single player they represent. They are positioning this as a fight for respect and equity, which sounds great in a press release. But they better be absolutely 100% certain that their leverage is real. If they have mistaken social media likes for actual economic power, they are about to learn a very painful and very expensive lesson.